The KwaZulu-Natal Public Works Department has laid criminal charges against a former supply chain management director and 3 other senior officials. In September last year, the department launched an investigation which uncovered serious irregularities in the awarding of 29 tenders worth more than 1.1 billion rand. The KwaZulu-Natal Public Works MEC Martin Meyer joins us this morning to have this conversation and also to speak about some of the findings from this investigation and the impact that that has on service delivery. MEC, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. 29 tenders, 1.1 billion rand to one company. That's correct. How did that happen?
So that was a big question that we asked when we realized this. We were doing a very thorough look at all the processes within the department after I took office. This was flagged and we said, well, hang on, this is a bit of a strange situation. And this means that one company has a monopoly over providing services to the department. So we said this needed to be investigated. Serious red flags happened. We suspended the official. I'm also very proud of the fact that gone are the days that the official is suspended for 2 years sitting at home. It was done in 60 days from the day we flagged it till the day we finished the investigation, and he was removed from his position. And we're now looking at our internal processes. We already strengthened our processes even before this investigation. So all our tender committee meetings are now recorded audibly and visually. We've really strengthened the internal things, but we're still ongoing with the investigation. How did this happen? What should have happened to prevent this from happening, and how can we be better as a department, making sure that all our officials follow the rules and the regulations.
But from the disciplinary process, what were you able to uncover around how this was able to take place? 29 contracts with 1.1 billion rand to one company. Ordinarily, there should have been red flags even from the 3rd or the 4th. 5th, 6th, but it continued to go on.
Absolutely, which is why we currently also have 2 disciplinaries against 2 other very senior officials within the department regarding the same, which also means, unfortunately, I can't give too much information because this is an ongoing matter, because it's impossible that one person alone would have been able to do this. There's processes in place, and the whole system must have failed, and means more people must have been implicit. So we're doing disciplinaries against 2 other very senior officials. We've already included them when we approached the Hawks for assistance. And that we, hopefully those 2 hearings, I think they are ongoing actually as we speak. They should be finished by next week. And then we'll be able to go to the public and say these are the other officials that were involved in these type of matters.
Are they part of the bid adjudication committee?
They are very senior officials in the department and hold senior positions. So they are the responsible line managers for these type of matters.
Yes, but what about the bid adjudication and bid evaluation committees?
So that's also part of our investigation now, which is also why we strengthened our internal system. So the other members of that committee will also be looked at.
Okay, and then the issue is, for me, in the article that we got from Times Live, is that there's the reference made to the one company. Yeah. But we don't know which company this is. What services does this company provide the department? Is there a reason behind not revealing the name of the company?
So it is they provided consultation services to the department, and they got a monopoly on almost all consultation. There has also been some of these contracts has been flagged for irregularities, that the services wasn't provided, or there was irregularities with the bids itself. So because that's currently part of an ongoing investigation, we made a decision as a department not to release the name of the company yet, as we are still investigating each contract individually now. But once we've completed all of that, we will, of course, because we believe in transparency, we want the public to be part of what we do in public works, and then we will release the name of the company as well.
Is the company still providing those consultancy services?
At this very moment, I don't think there's any services, if I remember correctly, currently happening from them. But as I said, we are looking at each contract individually, because we can't just blanket say we're stopping all contracts. We have to look at each individual case, and 29 contracts means it's quite a big job for us to do, but that will also be completed very shortly.
Have you had any time to assess the quality of work in consultancy that this company has provided the department? Whether or not it meets, whether or not the department gets a buck for the money that it spends.
Yeah. That's also one of the things that's been flagged in the chairperson's report in the disciplinary, that the quality of work is definitely under question. There has been some things that already raised with the quality of work they've done, or with the professionals that were used that weren't necessarily the type of professionals that should have been used. So there's quite a few red flags that has been raised. I think there's also a bigger matter here. I think it also raises the fact that we as a department has become way too dependent on consultants. We spent literally billions of rands on consultants, which is also why I think one thing that we have to do going forward is we have to strengthen our own internal strength as a department, our capabilities, so that we can become less dependent on consultants and do more of these things in-house. There's a school we recently opened that we didn't use any consultants, and that school cost us almost 20% cheaper than another school of the same size would have cost. So we are too dependent on consultants, and I think that's part of the bigger problem.
Yeah, and that's an issue that the Auditor General has raised before as well, that why not strengthen the various departments, including local government for that matter, instead of relying on consultants, because sometimes with all of the consultants that are being used, you still find a situation in terms of the finances and the balance sheet of the various entities that they're still in the red, and sometimes the books are not in order, even though you have consultants that have been appointed.
Absolutely, which is also why in the next 2 months we'll be launching our infrastructure advisory body, which will be a body within a department made up of various experts in the field of infrastructure and the built environment that will be able to advise us, and they will also be available to local government within KwaZulu-Natal, so that we can assist making all departments and local government, especially your smaller municipalities, much less reliant on consultants. And so we have the services in-house, we have the capability, the engineers, the water engineers, all of that in-house. Let's rather use that, and it will cut cost and means we have much greater oversight over the quality of work, because with an outside contractor, it's very difficult always to monitor exactly what the quality of work is. So I do think it will strengthen all of infrastructure delivery within a province once this board is set up.
Yeah, a bit earlier on, when we were doing our paper run, we made reference to the front page of the Business Day. This is an interview that they had with the Minister of Infrastructure, Dean McPherson, and it speaks about the infrastructure fix-up. The state dangles around 200 billion rand. But in the article, the Minister makes reference to at least 4 municipalities that have been identified, 4 municipalities that have shown that their books are in order and would be able to benefit from such an initiative where you have the public sector as well as the private sector coming together to deal with some of the bulk infrastructure that is required in the various municipalities. Are you at liberty to share with us who those municipalities are?
Unfortunately, that's a national department matter, so I wasn't. I don't
so you
have
wouldn't know whether your province has a municipality that could have been shortlisted for?
Unfortunately, I do, if I remember correctly, in our province there is one, the Umgeni municipality, but I speak under correction because that is a national department processes, so we weren't involved in that at all.
Okay, but do you have an idea of how this is going to work, especially the push for the public, for the private-public partnership? Yeah. And we know, of course, there has been this push as well from the Government of National Unity around how do we get this various spheres of government as well as the private sector come together to deal with bulk infrastructure. Specifically, now even during the ANC's January 8th statement, one of the priorities that was listed was dealing with the water issues.
Yeah. So absolutely. Government just doesn't have the money to provide all the services that people expect us to do. That unfortunately is the reality. I mean, in KwaZulu-Natal, we're facing a 9 billion rand deficit as a provincial government for the budget here, which is why public-private partnerships is the only way forward for us. The thing in the past is I've engaged with many private sector, both in the country and outside investors, foreign investors, and they all said exactly the same thing. The PPP process is just too cumbersome, too difficult, and we're just not interested while it is like that. The Minister of Finance has, however, announced that the whole process is being redone, simplified, made a lot easier. And I'll give an example. Within KwaZulu-Natal, we only have one successful PPP currently, and that is the Chief Albert Luthuli Hospital in eThekwini. It's the only successful PPP in the whole province, and that's not acceptable. We've just launched a couple of weeks ago. We launched our new government precinct building within eThekwini, where all departments will be in one building called the EGB, the Esplanade Government Building, and that's being done through a PPP. So we're now really committed to that. And we are launching our Build KZN Better conference that will happen on the 28th and 29th, where we're bringing the private sector on board to saying this is all the properties we own. Come with suggestions. How can we make these properties work for the people of KwaZulu-Natal? So we're really getting out there, because the reality is government can't do it by ourselves. We need communities, we need NGOs, NPOs, and we need the private sector to come on board with us.
Yeah, and another headache, I guess, for the department is the impact of climate change and how do you build buildings that are climate resilient, which is very important right now. But earlier on, we were speaking to the Transport Department spokesperson in KwaZulu-Natal about the inclement weather and how that has affected the roads, as an example. And we know the 2022 floods and still reeling from that shock of the 2022 floods.
Yeah. No, I mean, and the horrible thing is that in the past, we just rebuilt as was. So a school will be washed away. We will rebuild that school in exactly the same place, exactly the same way. 2 years later, the school's washed away again, and we are very surprised that that's happened. So we are looking into different building methods. We are looking in a lot more green technology, making our buildings a lot more environmentally friendly, but also climate resilient. We're looking at different building materials. We should be maybe looking at hemp bricks and cement, for instance, going forward. But another thing that I'm doing a lot of research on and getting my top department a lot of research on is that we have no such thing as flood defences within South Africa, and especially in KZN.
What does that mean?
So flood defences, if you go to countries like the UK, they literally build things around rivers on their coastal areas to protect the surrounding areas from floods. And we don't have things like that within South Africa. And unfortunately, with the climate changing as it is, we have going to start looking at it. If you look at towns like Newcastle, Ladysmith, every time there's hard rains, those same rivers come down, they wash away in the same buildings and cause damage to our infrastructure at exactly the same places. So we're going to have to start investing into flood defences. We have to accept that, unfortunately, we've missed the window to stop the impact of climate change. Climate change is now with us. We're going to have to accept that. Now what we're going to have to do is refocus on how do we protect ourselves, the people of KwaZulu-Natal, from the impact of this climate change. I mean, I live in Durban, of course, and the rain we've had over the last 2 weeks is just, in all the years I've lived here, we've never had weather like this. And we, as a government, are going to have to be a lot more proactive and responsive to these type of matters.
Yeah. And speaking now just about the derelict buildings and buildings that have been left abandoned, the decision around taking over, for instance, West Point Lodge,
yeah.
And the invitation to the private sector to say that we have a number of buildings that we would be listing. How does the department determine around which building goes to which private sector individual or which developer to say that this is what we have to offer, at what cost though, considering that some of these buildings are derelict?
So one of the things that we've realized is that government isn't very good with coming with fresh ideas. We were pretty stuck in our ways as government, you know. And we realized that the private sector is much better placed to come with fresh ideas. So what we're doing is we're going to put these buildings on the table and says, well, come with bids, but we're not telling you this is what we want. You're telling us what you can do with it. We only have a couple of things that we say. We want the community must benefit from it. It mustn't be exclusively used by a certain part of the community or whatever the case might be. And this is something that's happened in provinces like the Western Cape with some success. And I'll take a building, for instance. There's a building called Palm Beach Hotel. It's an old hotel that's not totally derelict. It belongs to the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure for some reason. And we're saying, but there's so many different things you can do with it. You can have a mixed development where part of the building is social housing and part of it is private flats that people can buy or rent or whatever the case might be. With the EGB building that I spoke about earlier, the bottom floors will be commercial. Then there'll be floors that the company can rent out for income, and the rest will be for government use at no cost, obviously, because it is our building at the end of the day. And it will go through the normal bid processes. So it's not going to be that we give preference to any one private company or anything like that. All those bids will be put in, the suggestions they make. It will go through the normal bid processes. The department will decide what is the best use we can get from a building, and that will go through those normal things. So we're putting a lot of check and balances in place.
Yeah. And this includes the video and audio recordings that...
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely. Everything will be happening out in the light. There's no more darkness in public works.
A quick one, also MEC, is on Ithala Bank. And I want to take it back to when the Democratic Alliance, back in 2010 already, had raised issues with the Ithala Bank and called on the board of Ithala Bank to resign. There were issues that were raised that they're not complying with the licensing conditions, and now the Prudential Authority is seeking to liquidate Ithala Bank. Is this something that Cabinet is going to be discussing, the Provincial Cabinet, around how you deal with this? But from the Democratic Alliance's side as well, is that what should happen once red flags are raised, and how should the incumbents also respond to those red flags instead of saying that there's nothing wrong, because now there's this concern about what happens to people's money?
Absolutely. Ithala Bank is a set discussion point in our cabinet meetings. It's something the cabinet of the unity government takes extremely seriously. We've even had some special cabinets just focused on Ithala, and the Cabinet's putting everything we can, making sure that we can try and save Ithala Bank. The Minister of the MEC of Finance, MEC Rogers, and MEC for Economic Development and Tourism, MEC Zondi, is putting a lot of effort and is in constant negotiations and talks with the national government, other role players, and we want to make sure that we get the best possible outcome of this. Your second question is actually a very important one, and I think it speaks to how we are maturing as a democracy in South Africa. That in the past, the opposition parties were seen as enemies, and whatever the opposition party said was ignored. Now, I've just recently made that switch from opposition benches to government benches, and it's not always easy listening to your opposition, but we've really taken a stance that, you know, we can't just dismiss what the opposition raises with us. And myself, in my department, I have an open door policy with all opposition parties, even though it's not represented in the legislature of KZN. So if you have concerns, come to us. If you have suggestions, come to us. And with this, I think if in 2010, those red flags that were raised by the Democratic Alliance were listened to, if they said, listen, we might not agree with your policies, but what you are saying, there might be something valid, let's sit down, let's take this forward, then I think we wouldn't have been in this situation. And I think that's a lesson to us, who is now in government, to never just dismiss whatever the opposition comes with.
Does the provincial government believe that Ithala can be saved?
We are committed to doing everything we can to save Ithala. Ithala is got a emotional and historical role to play within KZN, but also, if I just look at, for instance, my department, if we want to make sure that previously disadvantaged communities get an opportunity to buy these buildings we're going to put in the market, we need a bank like Ithala that's able to give very low interest loans to people from disadvantaged communities to help them buy these buildings. So I need Ithala to work, the people of KwaZulu-Natal need Ithala to work, so we'll do everything we can to make sure Ithala is working.
Thank you so much for your time. Martin Meyer is the KwaZulu-Natal MEC for Public Works and Infrastructure.